This monument looked as if someone had read humanity like an open book and decided to leave philosophical commandments for all the people on the planet. For example, value truth, beauty, and love above all, striving for harmony with infinity. At the same time, among them were also such life rules that would make one shudder. Probably this is why cultural experts argue the Georgia Guidestones are a monument that evokes particular admiration among conspiracy theory enthusiasts. On top of everything else, the 120-ton structure appeared as if out of thin air, and who commissioned the granite instruction for future generations remains a mystery to this day. Elbert County in the state of Georgia is called the granite capital of the USA. There are about a dozen large mineral deposits there. In June 1979, a stranger entered the office of one of the stone processing companies. He headed straight for the director's office, Joe Fenley, and politely introduced himself as Robert Christian. And immediately from the threshold, he stated that this was not his real name, which already piqued the interest of the office owner. Christian said he represented the interests of good Americans who needed to return the lost humanity to the true path. Well, after such words, Fenley's attitude towards the visitor became quite skeptical. He thought that some kind of madman had decided to drop by. Nevertheless, Joe Fenley agreed to listen to the eccentric, and then he took out a shoebox. Inside was a model of the monument, 6 slabs that needed to be cut from granite and arranged in a specific way. Everything seemed acceptable until the client announced the height of the monument, 6 meters, and Fenley decided that he needed to gently get rid of him. Therefore, he named a price 5 times higher than the actual cost of the object. To his surprise, Christian agreed and went to the bank for the money. The strange client, wishing to withdraw a huge sum from some account while remaining incognito, aroused suspicion among the bank employees. They immediately reported him to the president of the financial company, Wyatt Martin. The banker personally came to meet the unusual visitor. He still remembers in detail what the man looked like. He wore a very expensive suit, and his manners seemed impeccable. They started talking, and he told him something about his past, for example, about how he traveled to India and Bangladesh, where the idea for this amazing object was born. After that, he and some like-minded people spent almost 20 years designing all the details of the monument. This, of course, seemed incredibly interesting, but to conduct the banking transaction and sign documents, the personal details of the stranger were required. He evaded for a while, trying to remain incognito, and then extracted a promise from Martin never to disclose his name to anyone. The bank president shook the client's hand and kept his word. So on the day of the spring equinox, March 22, 1980, on the outskirts of Elberton, the monument appeared, which was called the Georgia Guidestones. To some, this monument might seem unremarkable. So what? Huge granite slabs with some inscriptions. But in reality, experts explain, the structure was designed in such a way that it represented a primitive observatory. The order specifically stated that these guide stones should be oriented according to the cardinal directions, aligned with the 4 astronomical directions by which astronomers navigate the starry sky. Additionally, the pole star had to be visible through a special hole drilled in one of the blocks. And in the upper blocks, holes were also made through which the sun's ray, hitting at noon, would necessarily fall on the mark on the central slab corresponding to a particular day of the year. Essentially, the concept of the Georgia Guidestones resembled the idea of the most famous archaeological monument in the world, the English Stonehenge. And journalists managed to find out the monument's client apparently specifically traveled to Wiltshire County and thoroughly studied the Neolithic boulders, thanks to which people determined the phases of the moon, the path of the sun, and the movement of the stars. However, cultural experts argue that even if Robert Christian was inspired by Stonehenge, he couldn't implement even a tenth of the original idea. According to experienced astronomers, the model of the Georgia Guidestones itself is quite primitive because Stonehenge, for example, allowed for dozens of different star observations, while here there are only a few combinations. It was a kind of copy of Stonehenge that would allow for constant observation of the pole star and simultaneously understanding what day it is. But in reality, from the perspective of astronomy and observations, the model itself is quite primitive. If Stonehenge is called an astronomical computer, then the Georgia slabs are no more than a calculator. But what made the Georgia Guidestones an absolutely unique monument were the inscriptions. 10 philosophical sayings resembling religious commandments like calls to live in peace, be more tolerant, and seek inner harmony are translated into 12 languages, including dead ones. We're talking about Akkadian, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Ancient Egyptian. Moreover, specialists say there was not a single error in the inscriptions because the author of the monument's idea placed a private order with the translation service of the United Nations. Why these particular languages were chosen and not others, and what meanings were embedded, remains a mystery. The most important thing is that those 10 commandments, called the Georgia Guidestones, do not bring anything fundamentally new to humanity, except for one important thesis that the population of planet Earth should not exceed 500 million people. And it is precisely this thesis that attracted special attention in 1980, when there were such apocalyptic sentiments that the end of the world was near, that soon there wouldn't be enough food on Earth, water would run out, and oxygen would run out. But this wish for humanity already sounded like a threat. Tourists with unstable psyches near the granite block would almost lose consciousness. Some complained that they allegedly heard voices, so the monument was quickly adopted by occultists. They considered it their place of power. The object immediately became cult in every sense of the word. First, it was a novelty, and second, it sparked intense interest in what was written there. And naturally, various people began to flock, performing some unknown rituals, wearing special clothing like, for example, hooded robes. Soon, local priests demanded the monument be demolished. The most zealous fighters for faith regularly splashed it with paint and wrote petitions to the county and state administration. Farmers feared that their livestock would soon be stolen for sacrifices. The residents of Elbert called the monument Satanic Stones. An unexpected resolution came on July 6, 2022. Early in the morning, an explosion was heard. Police found out the explosives were in an inconspicuous foreign car parked near the monument. Its owner has still not been found. Could it be that someone was so offended by the granite slabs? Or was this the finale of a 40-year performance? For a long time, American journalists tried to unravel the main mystery of the Guidestones. Who was that Mr. Christian? And did he even exist in reality? No traces of the mysterious stranger were ever found. And soon, banker Wyatt Martin and stone processing company owner Joe Fendley were suspected of collusion. Joe Fendley, as the owner of the granite workshop, still remains the person on whom it is assumed that he is the true client, because he could afford the granite slabs for free, essentially providing them to himself, claiming they were for large sums. But the last clue was destroyed back in 2012. At least Wyatt Martin himself claimed that he burned all documents related to the erection of the monument. And in December 2021, he died, taking the secret of the client to the grave. And the monument, until it was blown up, remained excellent advertising for Joe Fendley's granite workshop.